The Americans and the British did everything in their power to bury this project. They wove dirty conspiracies and brazenly forced their own fighter into NATO, throwing the competitor onto the scrap heap of history. But they made a fatal miscalculation. Meet the Dassault Mirage III. That very same rebellious French miracle that thumbed its nose at the superpowers. How did this outcast, rejected by its allies, suddenly transform into an absolute global bestseller? What scandals were the creators hiding? This unique delta-winged predator with rocket boosters and hidden gun modules simply shattered all the templates of aviation design. Watch this video until the very last second. Today, I will give you exclusive insights into this masterpiece. Let's not delay, let's get started. France, 1953. A country that lay in ruins 8 years ago is looking to the sky again. Not metaphorically, literally. Aviation factories were destroyed. Design bureaus were scattered. The best engineers were either dead or dispersed across the globe. And yet, on February 4th, 1953, the French Air Force published an official document. A technical tender for the development of a new interceptor fighter. A piece of paper with 4 requirements. 4 points that sounded like pure science fiction in 1953. Let's break them down one by one. Because this is exactly where, in these 4 lines, the whole story begins. The first requirement: the aircraft must be able to take off and land on field airfields. Not on concrete runways in the deep rear, on dirt, on fields. This means it had to be light, durable, and undemanding of conditions. Like a hardy mountain pony that doesn't need a stable. Only this pony had to fly faster than sound. The second requirement: Mach 1.3. If you don't follow aviation, let me explain. Mach number is the ratio of an aircraft's speed to the speed of sound. Mach 1 is approximately 1,200 kilometers per hour at cruising altitude. Mach 1.3 is already about 1,560 kilometers per hour. In 1953, most production fighters barely crossed Mach 1, and that was a cause for celebration. The French wanted Mach 1.3 as a working, everyday flight regime. The third requirement: a climb to 15 kilometers in 4 minutes. Imagine the plane is on the runway. 4 minutes is the time it takes to pour and drink a cup of coffee. During these 4 minutes, the machine must ascend to where the atmosphere is almost ending, where the sky turns from blue to deep purple, almost black, where a person without a pressure suit loses consciousness in a few seconds. Most aircraft of that time didn't even get that high. The fourth requirement: the ability to carry one air-to-air missile weighing 200 kilograms. 200 kilograms is about the weight of an adult brown bear. The aircraft is required to carry this load in supersonic flight mode. 4 requirements: simple, clear, ironclad. And here is that very moment that needs to be said directly. No aircraft in the world at that time met them. None. Not American, not British, not Soviet. Nowhere on the planet in 1953 did a machine exist that did all of this simultaneously. Now think, who takes on such a task? Who in their right mind raises their hand and says, "Yes, we will do it"? France in 1953 is not an aviation superpower. It is a country that is only catching its breath after the hardest years. The aviation industry had to be gathered literally from shards. Little money, little time, almost no experience in creating supersonic machines. But the French engineers had something that you can't buy for any money: character, and an absolute, almost stubborn desire not to be second. The French Air Force was waiting for bids for the tender, and they arrived. 4 aircraft manufacturing associations took up the challenge. 4 teams, 4 different aircraft. 4 different answers to the same question: what should the French fighter of the future look like? So, the contest is announced. 4 requirements are thrown into the air as a challenge. and 4 French aircraft manufacturing associations accepted this challenge. Let's get to know each of them, because behind each of these machines is a separate philosophy, a separate view of what an ideal interceptor should be. The first participant is an aircraft from the Northern Aviation Association of France. The machine was named the Nord 1500 Griffin, in honor of the mythical creature, half eagle, half lion. The name was not chosen by chance. The Northern designers bet on something unusual, an annular air intake that circled the nose of the plane along its entire perimeter, like a hoop. Looking at it in profile, an ordinary plane. Looking at it head-on, a round ring. This was a bold, almost provocative idea. Did it work as intended? That's a separate conversation. The second participant is a machine from the Southeastern Aviation Association of France. The aircraft was named Durandal, after the legendary sword of Roland from French medieval epic. Sharp, precise, unstoppable. This is how its creators saw this interceptor. One turbojet engine, a delta-shaped wing. A simple, laconic solution without unnecessary experiments. The Southwestern engineers trusted the classics. The third participant, and perhaps the most unusual among all 4, is an aircraft from the Southwestern Aviation Association of France. The machine received the designation SO9000 Trident, and by character, it was indeed a Trident. A mixed power plant, 2 Armstrong Siddeley Viper turbojet engines on the sides of the fuselage, and 1 liquid propellant rocket engine in the tail. 3 sources of thrust simultaneously. This was the most powerful and the most complex of the 4 machines. It was the one aiming for records. The fourth participant, and it is connected to the main part of our story, the Dassault Aviation Association presented an aircraft with the designation MD-550, Mr. Delta 550. Small, light, with a thin delta wing, no exotic features, no 3 engines or annular air intakes. The Dassault team bet on grace and aerodynamic purity of the design. 4 machines, 4 teams, 4 answers to 1 question. Tests went on for several years. And here, 1956, the jury is ready to name the winner. It becomes the Trident. The SO9000 Trident from the Southwestern Association. The logic is clear. The Trident was the first of the 4 machines to fulfill all the declared flight technical requirements. Plus, it had the support of partners from the United Kingdom and the United States of America. In 1956, this carried a lot of weight, politically and financially. It would seem the story is finished. There is a winner. But here the story makes its first turn. Sharp, unexpected, and very French. The winner turns out to be not at all the one expected. Because that same autumn of 1956, the Trident program was closed, completely, without explanations for the general public. The winner of the contest, and suddenly closed. And the blueprints of the MD-550 from Dassault, the fourth participant who didn't win anything, land on the designer's table again. So, the winner is named Trident, officially, on paper, with signatures. What did this mean in practice? The Trident was a powerful machine, 3 sources of thrust simultaneously, which in itself was unprecedented for a production fighter. It was the first of all contest participants to fulfill the requirements for flight technical characteristics. It had financial and technological support from Great Britain and the United States of America. By all formal signs, an undisputed winner. And yet, in the autumn of 1956, the program was closed, completely, without public explanations. Why? The answer lies not in technology. It lies in politics. To understand this decision, you need to feel the atmosphere of France in the mid-50s. It is a country with a very painful memory. A country that was liberated by someone else's hands quite recently. A country that lived through the humiliation of occupation and remembered very well what it meant to depend on someone else's decisions. The French military and political leadership of that era was panicky about technological dependence on allies, even friendly ones, especially friendly ones. And now, look at the Trident with different eyes. Its engines are British, Armstrong Siddeley Viper. Its financing, with the support of Washington and London. Its key technologies are tied to partners in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The Trident was a winner, but a winner that had too many foreign masters. Imagine such a situation. You are building a house. The house turned out excellent, but the foundation belongs to a neighbor. The roof was bought on credit from another neighbor, and the keys to the front door are kept by a third. Formally, your house. Factually, not quite. This is exactly the situation France would have been in with the Trident in service. The program was closed. This decision still causes disputes among aviation historians. Some call it political myopia, others cold strategic calculation. But whatever you call it, the fact remains. The best aircraft of the contest was stopped not by technical problems. It was stopped by political will. And what happens next is a completely different story. Because while the Trident was still listed as the winner, in the Dassault Design Bureau, completely different work was already underway. In 1956, the Dassault team began to rethink its MD-550. Not to finish, not to improve in small ways, to rebuild from the very beginning. Think about this for a second. You participated in a contest. You didn't win. Officially, you lost. The winner is already named, not you. Most people in your place would have rolled up the blueprints and gone home. The Dassault engineers stayed at their desks. They knew something that no one around them knew. They knew that their idea was right, that the aircraft they invented hadn't yet shown everything it was capable of. And they worked. The result of this work was an aircraft that received a new name. No longer MD-550, Mirage I. But to understand why this new name was deserved, we need to look at what exactly the Dassault designers changed over these few months. Because the list of changes was not just long, it was radical. From January to May 1956, 5 months. That's how much time the Dassault designers needed to turn the losing MD-550 into something fundamentally new. Let's go through these changes one by one, because in this list is the entire engineering philosophy of the team. First, the shape and size of the wing. The wing wasn't just changed, it was completely reconsidered. The plan form was changed, the span was changed, the profile was changed. The aircraft's wing is not just what holds it in the air, it is the main compromise between lift, air resistance, and maneuverability. Every centimeter of the wing is someone's head that ached over equations. The new wing of the Mirage I was thinner, sharper, more precisely tuned for high speeds. Second, the vertical stabilizer. It was also reworked, bigger, a different shape. At supersonic speeds, the behavior of the aircraft in the air changes radically, and the tail assembly must compensate for this. Third, the engine. They installed a new modification of the engine with the designation MD-30R. Its main difference from the previous version is the afterburner. The afterburner is, in simple terms, the ability to inject additional fuel directly into the red-hot jet of the engine's exhaust gases and ignite it. Thrust rises sharply. Fuel consumption also rises sharply. But for those few minutes when it is needed, for example on an intercept or during a climb, the aircraft receives a powerful additional push. Fourth, and this is where it gets truly interesting, a SEPR-66 liquid rocket booster was added to the aircraft. A separate rocket engine that runs on liquid fuel and provides additional thrust on top of the main turbojet engine. Imagine a cyclist. He has legs. This is the main engine. But for a particularly steep climb, he turns on a small electric motor that helps him climb up. That is approximately the role the SEPR-66 played, only instead of a bicycle, a supersonic fighter. Fifth, the air intake was redone. Sixth, a new ejection seat. Seventh, a braking parachute, which is deployed upon landing and sharply brakes the aircraft during the rollout. A particularly important thing, if you remember the first requirement of the contest, takeoff and landing on short-field airfields. The machine was renamed. The MD-550 became the Mirage I. The name stuck immediately. But the work didn't stop. Based on the Mirage I, they began to build the next machine, the Mirage II. And here, the designers decided to go even further. The Mirage II already received 2 liquid rocket engines instead of 1, and 2 Turbomeca Gabizo turbojet engines, 4 sources of thrust. The machine was supposed to become even faster and higher. But during the design of the Mirage II, a problem arose. A serious problem. Initially, the aircraft was designed without an onboard radar station at all. The designers and the military agreed. The functions of target detection would be taken over by a ground-based radar network, which was planned to be deployed throughout the country. The aircraft receives target designation from the ground, goes out for interception, and completes the task. The logic is clear. Without a radar station on board, the aircraft is lighter, simpler, cheaper. But they had to abandon the ground network. The price proved unaffordable. To deploy hundreds of radar stations across France, link them into a single network, ensure reliable communication with aircraft. This cost huge money, which they didn't have. And now the designers faced a very unpleasant fact. The aircraft, which was initially conceived without a radar station, now had to receive one. Stuffing a radar station into the nose of a machine that wasn't designed for it is not just a technical task. It is a puzzle where every solution breaks 3 others. The Mirage II stalled. It became clear. A cosmetic repair is not needed. A fundamentally new machine is needed, designed with all the lessons learned, both from the Mirage I and the Mirage II. That is how the decision for the third machine was born. Its working name was simple and final. Mirage III. The Mirage III. The Dassault designers took a blank sheet of paper. Not entirely blank. It had all the experience of the 2 previous machines, all the mistakes, all the findings, all the compromises. But the approach was new, and the first thing they did was apply a principle that in the aviation of that time was almost a revelation. The area rule. It sounds like something from a geometry textbook, but behind this term is an idea that literally changed the shape of supersonic aircraft around the world. I'll explain it simply. When an aircraft accelerates to the speed of sound and goes through it, the air around it behaves completely differently than at subsonic speeds. Shock waves occur. Resistance increases sharply. The aircraft seems to run into an invisible wall. Researchers discovered if the cross-sectional area of the aircraft, that is, the area of its slice, if you imagine that you cut it across anywhere, grows smoothly and without sharp jumps from nose to tail, then resistance at supersonic speeds drops sharply. Imagine a drop of water. It slides through the air with almost no resistance, precisely because its shape grows smoothly in the front and just as smoothly ends in the back. The area rule is an attempt to do the same with an aircraft that has wings, engines, a cockpit, and dozens of other protruding elements. In practice, this meant a special fuselage shape. In the place where the wings connect to the body, the Mirage III's fuselage narrowed noticeably, precisely so that the total cross-sectional area would remain smooth. From the side, this looks like a light waist in the middle part of the aircraft. Precisely this area rule allowed the Mirage III to do what no production European aircraft had done before it, to fly stably and confidently deep past Mach 2, beyond 2 speeds of sound. The second key solution, movable air intake lips. The air intake is the entrance through which air enters the engine. At different flight speeds, the engine needs a different amount of air under different pressure. If the air intake is fixed, it works well in one mode and worse in all others. Movable lips allowed the airflow to be regulated automatically depending on speed. The engine received exactly what it needed and when it needed it. Now, the engine. They installed one turbojet engine on the Mirage III with the designation ATAR 101G-1 of French production. No British or American thrust. A completely French engine. And the third idea that made the Mirage III special, modularity. The designers built into the aircraft the ability to change its stuffing depending on the task. First option, in a special compartment under the fuselage, 2 Defied cannons of 30mm caliber with 250 rounds of ammunition for each are installed, plus an additional fuel tank for the turbojet engine. This increased the range of the flight. Second option, instead of cannons and additional fuel, a CEP R841 liquid rocket booster is installed in the same compartment. It gave the aircraft an additional, powerful thrust impulse for a quick climb during interception. One in the same aircraft, different tasks. different stuffing. In May 1957, the French Air Force made the first official order: 1 two-seater combat trainer aircraft and 10 single-seater combat machines. It was a signal to the whole aviation world. The program is real. The machine exists. France believes in it. And in September 1957, an order for a large batch of experimental Mirages followed. For a full and comprehensive study of the entire construction, avionics, weapon systems, the French military wanted to know everything about their new aircraft before putting it into series production. The Mirage III was ready to prove everything that was expected of it. But now eyes were turned toward it not only from Paris. The aircraft was also looked at in the headquarters of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And here, the story makes a turn again, completely unexpected. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization in the late 50s is the largest military alliance in the history of mankind. For any European arms manufacturer, getting onto the alliance's list of suppliers is not just prestige. It's hundreds of aircraft. It's tens of thousands of flight hours. It's financial stability for decades ahead. It's recognition. France wanted this recognition very much, and the Mirage III was presented for the alliance's consideration as a serious contender. But here a circumstance arose that could not be changed by any technical arguments. The Mirage III program lagged behind the initially appointed deadlines by 2 years. 2 years is an enormous period in aviation programs of that time. In 2 years, competitors did not stand still. In 2 years, political agreements managed to fall into a completely different configuration. And while the Mirage III was completing its experimental program, the alliance was already looking in the other direction, in the direction of an American aircraft, with the official designation Lockheed F-104 Starfighter. The Starfighter. Starfighter was an American machine to the core. Sharp as a needle, narrow as a pencil. Small delta wings, huge engine, speed of Mach 2+. The Americans actively promoted it to partners in the alliance, and the political weight of Washington in this promotion played a role no less than the flight technical characteristics. Germany chose the Starfighter. Italy chose the Starfighter. The Netherlands, Belgium, Norway, the Starfighter. The Mirage III received minimal distribution in the countries of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. For Dassault, this was a painful moment. A 2-year lag cost a lot of money. But here, and precisely here, the history of aviation offers one of its most beautiful lessons. Because while the alliance looked to the west, the rest of the world looked to the east, to France. Countries not bound by obligations to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization were not obliged to buy American aircraft. They bought what they considered best for their tasks and their budget. In the Mirage III, an elegant, high-speed, multifunctional French aircraft very quickly began to attract their attention. The first major non-European country to show serious interest was Australia, then Israel, then the Republic of South Africa. Then the list began to grow at such a speed that it was difficult to keep track of it. Argentina, Brazil, Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, Chile. That's just Latin America. Egypt, Libya, Lebanon, United Arab Emirates, Pakistan. That's the Middle East and Asia. Belgium and Spain from Europe still joined the list. In the end, 20 countries of the world operated the Mirage III. 20. For comparison, the Starfighter, the official winner of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization tender, which was given preference over the Mirage, was operated in about 15 countries. The aircraft that was rejected by the largest military alliance on the planet eventually spread around the world more widely than the winner of that very tender. 20 operating countries. This is more than many official winners. In total, 1,422 Mirage III aircraft were produced in various modifications. Production was conducted not only in France. Licensed versions were assembled in several countries, adapting the machine to specific local requirements. 1,422 aircraft. For a European machine, created by a country that was restoring the aviation industry literally from scratch, this is a figure that is hard to overestimate. But numbers are one thing. Contracts are one thing. The real price of an aircraft is not assigned in offices or at air shows. It is assigned in the air. And the Mirage III paid its price in full. Aviation technology lives a double life. The first life, on paper, blueprints, calculations, technical assignments, test flights over familiar terrain with prepared pilots and ground crews ready for any emergency. The second life, real. For the Mirage III, the real life began in the Middle East. It was here, in the heated air over deserts and the sea, that the aircraft passed a test that no test bench can replace. It was here that it became clear what it was actually worth. Imagine such a picture. Early morning. The temperature is already over 30 degrees, although the sun has barely risen. Dust. A concrete runway, heated from yesterday. And on this runway, the Mirage III. A thin, sharp silhouette, delta wing, shiny metal of the fuselage. The pilot takes his seat. The ATAR engine starts. The characteristic growing whistle of the turbine. In a few minutes, the aircraft has already disappeared into the shimmering heat over the horizon. The Mirage III was used in the region in several fundamentally different roles, and each of these roles opened a new facet of the machine. Role 1, Fighter. An aircraft whose task is to oppose enemy aircraft in the air. Here, the Mirage III proved to be an aggressive and maneuverable machine. High speed, sharp reflexes, the ability to quickly gain altitude, all this worked exactly as the Dassault designers intended. Role 2, Interceptor. This is a completely different task. An interceptor does not look for an enemy, it reacts. The target is detected, coordinates are received, the countdown has started. You need to climb, get on target, and complete the task before the target goes out of range. Here, the indicator that was laid down in the initial technical assignment of 1953 became decisive. A climb to 15 kilometers in 4 minutes. In practice, this indicator worked exactly as it did on paper. The reaction speed of the Mirage III on interception was its separate pride. Role 3, Strike aircraft. Strikes on ground targets. Here, the Mirage III appeared in a completely different image, not as a hunter in the sky, but as a precise performer of a specific task. Drop bombs, unguided aerial rockets. The aircraft that was designed as an interceptor turned out to be quite capable of this too. And finally, Role 4, Reconnaissance. They didn't plan this role for it at all, but the aircraft decided otherwise. The construction of the Mirage III turned out to be so flexible that engineers were able to create a special reconnaissance modification, Mirage 3R. In the nose of the aircraft, instead of a radar station, a container with camera equipment was installed. One and the same airframe, the same power plant, and a completely different task. The aircraft flew over the territory at high speed, photographed everything that was needed, and left before they had time to intercept it. This was an improvisation born of necessity, and it worked. That is what a truly successful construction means. Not one that perfectly performs one task, but one that can be adapted to tasks that the creators didn't even think about. Practice confirmed what the numbers said. The aircraft turned out to be multifunctional and truly maneuverable. Pilots who work on the Mirage III in various conditions spoke of it with respect. The machine responded to control accurately and predictably. It did not forgive gross mistakes. No supersonic aircraft forgives them. But with a trained pilot, it worked as a single organism. However, the most serious exam was still ahead. Because one day, the Mirage III met in the air with a machine that the whole world considered the standard of a light supersonic fighter. With the MiG-21 of the Mikoyan and Gurevich Design Bureau. And what happened at this meeting became a complete surprise for many. There is a special type of meeting in the history of aviation. Not a meeting at an air show where aircraft stand on the ground and the public walks around with cameras. Not a meeting in technical magazines where characteristics are compared in tables. But a real meeting, in the air, at speed, where every design decision either works or it doesn't. The Mirage III and the MiG-21 met exactly like that. And before talking about what happened at this meeting, we need to understand what these two aircraft represented. Because they were not just two different machines. They were the embodiment of two completely different philosophies about what an ideal fighter should be. The MiG-21 of the Mikoyan and Gurevich Design Bureau appeared around the same time as the Mirage III. Soviet engineers came to a similar idea, a light supersonic fighter with a delta-shaped wing. But they came to it in their own way and with their own priorities. Soviet philosophy sounded something like this. The aircraft should be simple, reliable, cheap to produce, easy to maintain, such that it could be operated by technical personnel of average qualification in field conditions, such that it could be produced by the thousands. The MiG-21 was exactly like that. Simple and reliable as a hammer, well-armed, high-speed, undemanding. The French philosophy was different. Dassault thought about flexibility, about multifunctionality, about having one and the same aircraft solve different tasks depending on what is installed in it. The Mirage III was more complex, more demanding of technical maintenance, but in return gave the pilot more capabilities. Two countries, two approaches, two aircraft. And here they meet in the air. The main arena of this meeting was the Middle East. Here the Mirage IIIs were in service with Israel, the MiG-21s with their opponents. This was, perhaps, the most intense and documented confrontation of these two machines in their entire history. Israeli pilots flew the Mirage III and knew it perfectly. They studied every feature, every strong and weak side. They knew how it behaves in a turn, how it reacts to engine throttling, where it has an advantage and where it doesn't. And now, the most interesting thing. Pilots who flew the MiG-21 against the Mirage III told afterwards about the same thing. They said that the Mirage turned out to be a surprise for them, a serious surprise. Not because it was faster. In maximum speed, the MiG-21 and the Mirage III were approximately comparable. Both flew confidently past Mach 2. The surprise was maneuverability. In air confrontation at high speeds, maneuverability is not only the ability to turn quickly, it is predictability. It is how accurately the aircraft does what the pilot asks of it. It is the difference between an instrument that obeys the hand and an instrument that sometimes thinks for itself. The Mirage III obeyed. The thin delta wing, which at first glance seemed like a compromise between speed and maneuverability, in practice behaved exactly as needed at medium altitudes in a close maneuverable confrontation. The pilot ordered, the aircraft executed. One of the Pakistani pilots who flew the Mirage III in confrontation with Indian MiG-21s described this feeling very accurately. He said that the Mirage felt not like a machine you control, but as an extension of your arms. You thought about a maneuver, and the aircraft was already starting it. This is the highest praise a pilot can give his machine. But the MiG-21 had its own trump cards, and it would be dishonest not to name them. The MiG was easier to maintain. It could be quickly prepared for a resortie. It was less demanding of fuel quality and basing conditions. In conditions of intensive use, when aircraft flew several sorties a day, this had great importance. The Mirage III required more attention from ground technicians. Movable air intake lips, complex avionics, a liquid rocket booster if it was installed. All this required qualified maintenance. In peacetime and good infrastructure conditions, no problem. In field conditions, a separate challenge. This is the essence of the difference between the two philosophies. The Soviet MiG-21 was created for mass use in a large confrontation, where every serviceable aircraft and every hour of preparation for a sortie counts. The French Mirage III was created for use in the hands of a trained pilot who knows how to squeeze everything that is laid into the machine out of it. None of them was better absolutely. Each was better in its context. But precisely the fact that the Mirage III, a European machine created by a small country restoring industry from scratch, stood in one row with the best Soviet light fighter of its time and did not yield to it, was for many observers of that time a real revelation. The French engineers in Paris could be satisfied. Their aircraft kept its word. But while pilots were testing the Mirage III in the air over the Middle East, in the Dassault Design Bureau, they were thinking about something else. About the fact that the capabilities of this platform were still far from exhausted, about where they could go next. And they went. There, where in the late 50s, very few people dared to look. There is a special type of engineer, not those who solve the task set by the customer, and not those who make an existing one a little better and a little cheaper, but those who, having finished one job, immediately start looking where most people haven't even turned their heads yet. In the Dassault Design Bureau in the late 50s, early 60s, exactly such people worked. The Mirage III was ready, flying, being sold, fighting. From the point of view of business and common sense, one could exhale. Adjust production, make a profit, enjoy the success. Instead, the Dassault engineers took the Mirage III platform and started asking questions to which they had no answers. Intentionally, because they wanted to find these answers. The first question sounded like this: what if the wing doesn't have to be fixed? Let's figure out why this is a question at all. Every aircraft has a fundamental contradiction. At low speeds, during takeoff, landing, patrolling, the aircraft needs a wide wing with a large area. A wide wing creates great lift, allows flying slower without risk of losing control, and gives stability. At high speeds, during supersonic flight, a wide wing becomes an enemy. It creates huge air resistance. The wider it is, the harder it is to accelerate the aircraft to the required speed. The more fuel is wasted. A fixed wing is always a compromise. You choose between two modes and find something in the middle that works acceptably in both, but perfectly in neither. And what if the wing can be changed right in flight? During takeoff and landing, wide, deployed, like the wings of a soaring eagle. During acceleration and supersonic flight, swept back, pressed to the fuselage, sharp as the tip of an arrow. Variable geometry wing. This idea had been discussed theoretically for a long time, but to realize it in practice is a completely different story. Because a wing that moves is a wing with hinges. This is a turning mechanism. This is additional weight. This is additional complexity. These are new points of potential failure. And yet, French engineers began work in this direction, using the developments of the Mirage III platform as a starting point. The result of these studies was a program that eventually went far beyond the Mirage III itself, and gave rise to a completely separate branch of French aviation. But the roots of this branch went precisely here, in those experiments of the late 50s, early 60s. But this was only the first question. The second was even more radical. And what if the aircraft doesn't need a runway at all? Stop for a second. Think about what this means in practice. A runway is a vulnerability. This is a long strip of concrete that is visible from the air, which can be put out of commission with one precise strike. An airfield without a runway is just a set of buildings and equipment that won't fly anywhere. Military strategists of that time thought about this very seriously. What will happen to aviation if in the first hours of a major conflict, all airfields turn out to be put out of commission? What if the aircraft can't take off, simply because there is nowhere to run? The answer was obvious theoretically, and almost impossible technically. An aircraft that takes off vertically, without a run, without a runway, straight up, like an elevator. And the Dassault designers, working on the basis of the Mirage III platform, began to move precisely in this direction. The result of this work was an experimental aircraft with the official designation Mirage III-5, from the French word vertical. This was a machine that externally resembled a combat Mirage III, the same outlines, the same delta wing, but inside, it was fundamentally different. For vertical takeoff, one March engine, the one that pushes the aircraft forward in horizontal flight, is completely insufficient. Thrust directed downward is needed. Thrust sufficient to lift the whole machine straight vertically against the force of gravity. The Dassault engineers solved this task like this. They built 8 additional lifting turbojet engines into the Mirage III fuselage. 8. Their only task is to create vertical thrust during takeoff and landing. In horizontal flight, they are not needed. They are just dead weight. Plus one main March engine for horizontal flight. Total, 9 engines on one aircraft. Imagine the volume of engineering work. To place 8 additional engines so that their thrust was evenly distributed and the aircraft didn't tip over during vertical takeoff. Ensure air supply to each of them. Create a control system that allowed the pilot to simultaneously control all 9 engines and keep the machine in balance in hover mode. This was work at the limit of the technical possibilities of its time. The Mirage III flew. This is a documented fact. Vertical takeoff was achieved. The program worked. But here the engineers encountered the cruel mathematics of aviation. 8 lifting engines is additional weight. Very large additional weight. In horizontal flight, these 8 engines gave nothing. They only took away. They reduced fuel reserves. They limited the payload. They complicated the construction to the limit. Vertical takeoff was achieved, but the price they had to pay for it in the flight technical characteristics of horizontal flight proved to be very high. The vertical takeoff program, in the form in which it existed, was not brought to a production aircraft. But this doesn't mean it was in vain. There are never any vain engineering programs. Every failure is knowledge about where not to go. Every dead end is a signpost that says, look elsewhere. The French engineers paid for this knowledge with years of work and significant resources, and received in return an understanding that eventually influenced all subsequent French aviation. Think about this from this side. The late 50s, early 60s. France, a country with a population of about 45 million people. A country that 15 years ago lay in ruins. A country without huge oil resources, without a giant military budget of a superpower. And this country simultaneously produces a production supersonic fighter, sells it to 20 states of the world, explores variable geometry wings, and builds an experimental aircraft with vertical takeoff. This is not bragging. This is simply a fact. And this fact says a lot about what happens when people have an idea, character, and an unwillingness to stop. But while engineers looked into the future, time went by. And every legend, sooner or later, has a moment when it is necessary to sum up. February 4th, 1953. A piece of paper with 4 requirements. A country in ruins. Engineers with character and an absolute unwillingness to be second. Remember what we started with? Let's now look at where all this came to. Today, most countries that operated the Mirage III have withdrawn it from service. Australia withdrew it. France withdrew it. Israel withdrew it. The Republic of South Africa withdrew it. Belgium, Brazil, Venezuela, Spain, Switzerland. The list is long. 17 states at various times said goodbye to this aircraft and switched to more modern machines. This is normal. This is correct. Technology ages. New tasks, new threats, new possibilities appear. An aircraft that was a pinnacle in 1957 cannot remain a pinnacle forever. But here is what is interesting. 3 countries did not withdraw the Mirage III from service: Argentina, Egypt, Pakistan. 3 countries, 3 different ends of the world: South America, North Africa, South Asia. Different climatic conditions, different tasks, different infrastructure, different opponents they had to count on, and everywhere, one and the same delta silhouette over the runway. The aircraft, whose first prototype took to the air more than 60 years ago, is still on combat duty. Think about this. When the Mirage III was just passing tests, many things we consider self-evident today did not exist yet. There were no personal computers. There were no mobile phones. Man hadn't been to the moon yet. The world has changed beyond recognition, several times, and the delta silhouette over the runway remained. What does this say about the aircraft? And what does this say about the people who created it? The Mirage III was not a perfect machine. No aircraft is perfect. It required qualified technical maintenance. Its liquid rocket booster in the installed configuration was capricious in handling. Its avionics by modern standards are, of course, history. But it had something that is impossible to write into a technical assignment and impossible to measure in numbers: character. The very same character that the people who created it had. Stubborn, independent, French. An aircraft that began with a loss in a contest. whose creators didn't win the tender when the Trident won, which was 2 years late and didn't pass the selection to the largest military alliance on the planet, which was built by a country just recovering from the ashes. This aircraft eventually spread to 20 countries of the world. It was produced in 1,422 copies. It fought on several continents. It stood its ground against the best Soviet light fighter of its time. It gave rise to a whole family of French combat aircraft that are still flying today. And today, right now, while you are watching this video, somewhere in Argentina, Egypt, or Pakistan, a technician in a work overall is preparing for a flight a machine whose construction goes back to the blueprints that French engineers drew in 1956 of the last century. There is something very important in this, not only for aviation lovers, for everyone, because the story of the Mirage III is not a story about an aircraft, or rather, not only about an aircraft. It is a story about what happens when people refuse to accept someone else's no as a final answer. When a loss in one contest doesn't mean the end of work, but means the beginning of the next stage. When limited resources and difficult circumstances become not a reason to stop, but fuel for moving forward. February 4th, 1953. A piece of paper with 4 requirements. They fulfilled them all, and a little more. The Mirage III, a French miracle. Not because there was something supernatural in it, but because the people who created it believed in it when there were no obvious grounds for this belief. This is, perhaps, the best definition of the word miracle that I know.